All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're going to dive deep into one of humanity's biggest questions.
Ooh, exciting.
What happens after we die? We've got all sorts of stuff, religious texts, scientific studies, cultural perspectives from all across the globe.
Wow.
So it's going to be quite a ride.
Sounds like it.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't interview someone who's, crossed over to the other side, at least not yet.
Yeah.
But can we, get some insights from different fields about what they have to say about life after death?
I think it's definitely worth a shot.
Okay.
So why don't we start with current scientific perspective?
All right, perfect. Lay it on us.
Okay.
What does science have to say about this whole life after death thing?
Well, I'll be upfront with you.
Okay.
There's no concrete scientific evidence that consciousness continues after the brain shuts down.
So, case closed. Science says, nope, end of story.
Not necessarily. It's not quite that simple.
Okay.
It's a little more nuanced than a simple yes or no.
Yeah.
It's more like with our current tools and understanding, we just can't measure it or prove it.
I see. So it's not like a denial, it's more of a limitation of our capabilities.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And this is kind of where things get a little interesting.
Okay.
There have been studies on brain death where even though the person is clinically deceased, there are these unusual bursts of brain activity.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, right at the very
It's
end.
kind of spooky.
It is intriguing, right? Raises more questions than it answers.
For sure.
So, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about near-death experiences,
Okay.
or NDEs.
Yes.
You've probably heard stories of people seeing bright lights or feeling a sense of peace,
Oh, yeah.
or even having out-of-body sensations.
Yeah, those are always really fascinating, sometimes a little unsettling,
Yeah,
but fascinating.
absolutely.
So what's the scientific take on all that?
Well, researchers like Dr. Pim Van Lommel and Dr. Bruce Grayson have dedicated their careers to studying NDEs.
Wow.
And they've found that a lot of the common elements, like the tunnel of light, can actually be explained by physiological changes that are happening in the brain during trauma.
So our brains are just freaking out and creating these crazy experiences.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay.
For example, oxygen deprivation during cardiac arrest can trigger unusual brain activity, and then that leads to hallucinations that feel super real.
Wow.
Wow.
So science is saying NDEs are just our brains messing with us.
Well, not so fast.
Okay.
While some explanations focus on the brain,
Right.
others suggest that consciousness might actually exist beyond it.
Ooh. Okay.
For instance, Dr. Stuart Hameroff
Okay.
proposes this idea of quantum consciousness.
All right. Now we're getting into some really mind-bending territory.
Yeah.
What is quantum consciousness?
So to understand that, we need to touch on quantum mechanics,
Okay.
which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
It governs the subatomic world.
Right.
It's a realm where things behave very differently than our everyday experience. Hameroff suggests that consciousness might be tied to quantum processes that are happening
Okay.
at this level within the microtubules of our brain cells.
So instead of it being just a product of our brains, it might be tapping into something more fundamental?
Exactly.
Like a quantum level?
And if consciousness is not limited to the physical brain,
Right.
the idea of it continuing after the body dies
Yeah.
becomes a lot more plausible.
That's wild.
Of course, it's still speculative.
Yeah, of course. But you have to admit, it's a very fascinating possibility.
It is a fascinating possibility.
It makes you wonder what happens to that consciousness.
Right. Where does it go?
Where does it go? Exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And it's a question that different cultures and religions have been grappling with for millennia.
So we're not the only ones obsessing over this. What happens next?
Not at all.
Okay.
Beliefs about the afterlife are practically universal.
Wow.
They pop up in every corner of the world, every historical period.
So what are some of the most intriguing beliefs out there?
Well, why don't we?
Give us a little glimpse into this global tapestry of
Okay.
after-death theories.
So let's start with the ancient Egyptians.
Okay.
They were incredibly focused on preparing for the afterlife.
Really?
They believed in this elaborate underworld,
Uh-huh.
and they went to extreme lengths to preserve the body through mummification.
Oh.
They would fill the tombs with provisions and treasures,
Yeah.
believing they would need them in the next life.
It's amazing how much effort they put into something they couldn't actually prove
Right.
existed.
It really speaks to the power of belief, right?
Yeah, it really does.
Now, in contrast to the Egyptians' focus on preserving the physical body,
Mm-hmm.
religions like Hinduism and Buddhism center around the concept of reincarnation.
Okay.
So it's not a one-time deal afterlife,
Right?
but a cycle of death and rebirth,
Okay.
with your actions in each life influencing what you come back as next.
Ah, good old karma.
Exactly.
What goes around comes around.
Precise.
Right.
Your actions in this life create ripples that
Yeah.
affect your future lives.
Wow.
So it's all about trying to break free from this cycle of suffering and achieve a state of enlightenment.
That's a pretty different concept from the Abrahamic faiths, like Christianity, where it's very much like this life determines your eternal fate, heaven or hell.
Yes, there's a definite contrast there.
Yeah.
The Abrahamic faiths emphasize a linear progression.
Okay.
This life determines your fate in the next, whereas Eastern traditions see it as a cyclical process.
It makes you wonder, like with such drastically different beliefs
Yeah,
about what happens after we die,
right.
are there any common threads?
Yeah.
Like any universal truths that connect them all?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one we'll definitely explore as
Okay.
we delve deeper into specific religious and philosophical perspectives.
Okay. Sounds good.
But for now,
Yeah.
let's just focus on a few key religions
Right.
and their unique views on the afterlife.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's begin with Islam.
Okay, let's dive into the Islamic perspective on the afterlife.
Okay.
What are some of the key beliefs there?
So in Islam, the afterlife is a central part of the faith.
Uh-huh.
It's not just an abstract concept.
Okay.
It's a vivid reality that shapes how Muslims live their lives.
Really?
And a core belief is the Day of Judgment,
Okay.
when Allah will judge each soul based on their actions and faith.
So every action matters, every decision.
Absolutely.
Ah.
The righteous, those who live the life of faith and good deeds, will be rewarded with paradise.
Okay.
Often described as this garden of bliss, with flowing rivers, delicious fruits, and the companionship of their loved ones.
Sounds idyllic.
Yeah, it does.
What about those who haven't lived such a righteous life?
So those who have strayed from that path of righteousness face the possibility of Jahannam, a place of fire and torment.
Oh, okay.
So this belief system incentivizes moral behavior and adherence to Islamic principles.
It's a powerful motivator to live a good life.
It is. Okay, so that's the Islamic view in a nutshell.
Yeah.
What other fascinating perspectives await us?
Well, let's shift gears and explore Hinduism.
Lead the way.
Okay.
I'm curious to see how it compares.
Okay, so unlike Islam,
Okay.
Hinduism doesn't focus on a single afterlife judgment.
Right.
Instead, it emphasizes the concept of samsara,
Right.
the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
So instead of a one-time judgment, it's like a constant feedback loop.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
Your actions in this life, your karma, determine what you're reborn as in the next.
Okay.
So live a virtuous life. You might be reborn into a higher state of being, closer to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make bad choices, you could be reborn into a lower realm,
Okay.
experiencing more suffering.
So it's this constant climb up the karmic ladder,
Essentially, yes.
trying to reach the top.
The ultimate goal in Hinduism is to break free from this cycle altogether,
Wow.
to achieve a state of liberation called moksha.
It's about transcending the limitations of the material world and uniting with the divine.
Sounds like a pretty lofty goal.
It is.
Okay, so we've got the Islamic emphasis on judgment
Right.
and paradise, and the Hindu focus on karma and reincarnation.
Yes.
Where do we go next on our tour of after-death beliefs?
Why don't we delve into Christianity?
Okay.
Offers a different perspective on eternal existence.
All right, hit me with the Christian viewpoint.
Right.
What's their take on the afterlife?
Well, Christianity revolves around the concept of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ.
Uh-huh.
And the core belief is that through this faith, you can achieve eternal life in heaven.
Okay.
And it's depicted as a place of perfect peace and happiness where you're reunited with your loved ones and dwell in the presence of God.
So heaven is the ultimate reward for the faithful.
That's right.
What about those who don't accept Christ or haven't lived a life in line with Christian teachings?
So for those who reject God's grace or haven't lived according to his will, there's the concept of hell, a place of eternal punishment and separation from God.
Okay.
And this dichotomy creates a stark contrast between the ultimate reward and the ultimate consequence.
Yeah, it definitely adds a different dimension to the whole live a good life message.
It does.
But I think some people might find the concept of eternal punishment maybe a little harsh.
Sure.
Does every branch of Christianity interpret hell literally?
That's a good question. And the answer is no.
Okay.
There are varying interpretations of hell within different Christian denominations.
Right.
Some see it as a literal place of fire and torment, while others view it as a more metaphorical state
Okay.
of spiritual anguish and separation from God.
So there's a lot of room for interpretation
Absolutely.
within Christianity.
In such a vast and complex religion.
Right, and within Christianity, there's also things like purgatory,
Yes.
like a temporary state where souls are purified before entering heaven.
Right, it's kind of like a spiritual waiting room
Okay.
for those who need a little extra preparation before joining God.
I see. So even within Christianity, there's multiple layers to the afterlife.
Right, it's not just a simple heaven or hell scenario.
Gotcha. But across all these religions, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity,
Yeah.
what stands out to you as like a common thread?
What's fascinating is that while the specifics vary wildly,
Uh-huh.
that underlying human need to make sense of death, to find meaning and purpose beyond our earthly existence,
Yeah.
that's a universal thread.
It is.
It speaks to something fundamental about our nature, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like we're hardwired to believe that there's something more.
Yeah.
Some form of continuation
Uh-huh.
beyond this physical life.
It's a powerful motivator,
It is.
driving us to live in a way that aligns with those beliefs.
It really is.
And this brings us to another compelling question.
Okay?
If there is something beyond,
Yeah.
can we do anything to prepare for it?
That's a question that gets to the heart of how we live our lives,
It does.
doesn't it?
It certainly does, and that's precisely what we'll explore in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, awesome.
We'll examine the different paths to preparation offered by various religions and philosophies,
All right.
and we'll delve into how this awareness of death can shape our actions and priorities in this life.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.